Hello everyone, welcome to a new chess video. Today we have here the best gambit among all the best, the Infernal Gambit. It's called that because your opponents will be in hell every time you play it. It's an Infernal Gambit. It's awesome. I'm sure many of you already know it. Today I'm going to explain it in detail so that all of you can play it very easily and win all your games. Look, for those who don't know it, we won't play knight or anything like that. Instead, we'll start by giving away pawns right away with d4. You might say, hey, chess teacher, this pawn isn't being given away, it's defended by the queen. Yes, but we're not going to recapture it, we're going to give away another pawn. And when they take it, we're not going to recapture it with a pawn or the knight either. Instead, we'll develop our bishop and they take yet another pawn. They end up with no options to develop their pieces, and that gives us all sorts of traps to punish them quickly. First of all, notice where this bishop is aiming, right here. That means they'll never be able to develop this dark squared bishop, because if they do, no matter where, we would take this pawn, and not just the pawn. Notice that the rook can't escape, so we would also win the rook. So in order to develop this bishop, they'd have to develop this other bishop first, or the knight to block the diagonal, but they can't do that either, because if we push the pawn, this knight runs out of squares. It can't go here because of the bishop, and it can't go to these two squares because of the queen. The only square left is to move in front of the pawn, and that's already a huge blunder, because we have the bishop sacrifice on f7. Bishop takes f7 check. They have to bring the king out, and now, with this move here, we have a double threat. Check to the king and attacking the knight. We'll be able to recover the material. And notice this, not only have we gotten the material back, but now this king here will never be able to castle because it's already moved and will be unsafe in the center, while our pieces are well placed to quickly attack the king, possibly with an eventual e6 to open up the position even more, so our opponent can't defend. Incredible. Well, just wait, because what comes next is even more amazing. The opponents. They have to do something here. We've seen that they can't develop this knight because we would kick it out, and what I just explained would happen. They can't develop the bishop because they would lose this pawn here. So they're stuck. Most people think, perfect, I'll develop this bishop and give a check, so they can't capture here. And this is very interesting. However, we have an exclusive recipe to crush our opponents. We'll block the check with the knight on d2. Notice we never place it here because we would be blocking the bishop's diagonal, and that bothers us. That's why we put it on d2. Now the opponent might think, all right, now I can just develop my pieces normally because there's no danger anymore. Plus I'm putting pressure on this point, and together with the bishop, I'm going to put pressure on the pinned knight. So everything seems perfect, but obviously it's perfect for us. At this point, your opponents could already resign. Look at how beautiful chess is. If you enjoy chess as much as I do, you're really going to love seeing this line. We just need to push the pawn forward. Notice that now this knight has run out of squares. However, we're actually setting a trap for our opponent. There's a very tempting square for this knight, which is this one right here. Perfect, our opponent must be thinking. We've blocked the diagonal. Now he thinks he can put pressure with all his pieces here. Notice that now they're threatening to take our knight because we wouldn't be able to defend it with the queen. If they captured, we would lose material badly. However, here we have to remember the secret move I already explained in the introduction. What is that amazing move? Bishop takes on f7. It's a move that, look, you always have to keep in mind whenever you play the Infernal Gambit. You capture here because even though we do not have queen to d5 now, the queen can still come out this way. Notice that we've given up so many pawns that our pieces are now free to move all over the board. Check. And now wherever they go, well, obviously I can't go here now, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but wherever they go, for example over here, we would simply recover this bishop here. However, what many people do, pay attention, this is very important, is defend against this check with d5. It looks like it supports the knight, it seems to block the check, and that we're just going to capture this bishop. But no. Here you need to remember that you can capture en passant. I assume you all know what en passant is, but if not, look up a tutorial. It's very simple. We capture en passant, giving check again, and now the king really does have to move aside. However, they can block with the bishop. What are we going to do? We're going to capture this bishop. Now we do, but notice the threats we have. We're threatening this knight and also this other knight here with our own knight. We're threatening to come in through here. And that's why in this position, most people choose to capture first themselves. I don't blame them because it's the most logical thing in the world, waiting for us to recapture this knight. But obviously that's not what we're going to do. Instead, we're going to make a really, really good move. Remember this spectacular move. We move the queen to the king's side, giving a check and gaining another tempo against our opponent. And now they're really going to think we'll capture this knight, but of course we won't. What we're going to do now is capture here, creating a deadly double threat. Thanks to placing the queen here, we're defending this square. And now we take the queen and attack the knight. Notice that our opponent is left with no options at all. Obviously, they have to move the queen away. And now I'm sure you're all thinking about recapturing this knight or recapturing that knight. Let me tell you, we're not going to do either of those moves. Look how beautiful chess is. With just two pieces, the queen and the bishop, we're winning the game super easily. We're going to place the queen right here. Why? First, because there's danger here with the queen and our king. There could be discovered attacks, but now there aren't any. And also, thanks to the alignment of the queen, we're creating a checkmate threat in one move. A move that a lot of people probably won't notice, and you can win here on the next turn. But even if they do notice, they're lost anyway. Look, now what do they have to do? Well, they have to defend against this checkmate here, and there are very few ways to do it. I think there's only one. Defend it with the queen, right? So how can they defend this pie? Well, for example, I can think of the move to come over here. What happens if they come over here? Now they're leaving this knight undefended, and when they capture, remember, this is a queen. We could come back in through here. Notice that we're completely winning. Our opponent can't do absolutely anything. The only way to defend the check is to bring the queen down, and now you could easily trade queens and capture this knight. You'd be winning because we have a lot of material advantage. But notice how beautiful chess is, because what we're going to do is neither one thing nor the other, but instead we're going to bring the queen here to put pressure on this threat again. See how we're applying a lot of pressure again? Now we're attacking the bishop. That's why they have to defend again. Notice that all their pieces are stuck here and can't do anything. Spectacular move. It's not about capturing the knight, but rather knight to f3. Look at this move. It seems like a disaster, doesn't it? Because we can capture this knight for free. And by making this move, it looks like we're just giving away this knight exchange to our opponent, right? But after the exchanges, notice that now we've opened the file in a super simple way to place our rook and put more pressure on this point here with another piece. Notice that it's indefensible. Obviously, our opponent will realize that we're going to attack with the rook, and the only way to defend this point again is to advance this pawn. And now defend it with the rook. Notice that there's no other way, but it's clear that here they're already lost, and how to bring another piece into the attack with a spectacular move. Since we haven't moved the king in a long castle, notice that we're now placing the rook to enter the last rank. And now, for real, there's no way to stop the rook from getting in. If they try to save it with the queen, for example, they'd be leaving this point undefended, and we would simply checkmate on the next move. We could first capture here, or even sacrifice our rook to then get in here. This is unstoppable. No, Chess Titchell, you're dreaming way too much. This looks great in videos, but this doesn't happen in real games. Well, the line we just saw right now is actually the most played line against the Infernal Gambit. I mean, imagine, this is the most played, but obviously it's not the only one. So what happens? If what they want to avoid is us advancing this pawn, good on them. They want to play d6. They can play this move a lot, so you have to be super prepared. Very simple. We're just going to develop our fight. And here there are several options. For example, bishop to e6 to try to trade this bishop. And now we'll see what happens. Also very simple, and the most spectacular of all, is when they get too clever and try to pin our knight. Notice that here there's a devastating move to win all your games. The move is bishop takes f7. And you might say, hey chess teacher, this move, you're showing it all the time. Spectacular, yes, because it works in every line. Look, bishop takes f7 seems like it doesn't work because after king takes, now we can't jump with the king. With the knight here to capture this bishop because they take us with the queen and defend the bishop. And we also can't jump here because of the pawn. But obviously we can jump here. Why? because this pawn can't capture since the queen would be hanging, and they'd lose the queen. That's why after this check, they have to move, and we could capture this bishop. Notice that this move is super effective whenever they play bishop to g4 against us. All right, Chestiches, but obviously if they play silently and have 2 extra pawns, you're not going to be able to do anything. Well, that's nonsense, because we have a lot of open lines, and we can finish them off no matter what they play. Check this out. We simply exchange the bishop, and with so many open lines, now what we do is queen to b3. Be creative when you play this gambit. Be creative. You're going to have a lot of open lines. You'll be able to do a lot of things. But look, this is important. Double attack. We're attacking this pawn, and we're attacking this pawn over here. There's only one move that defends both pawns, and that's queen to b8. Your opponent will think, well, yeah, I have 2 extra pawns. I'm defending everything. You can't do absolutely anything. However, we can keep up the pressure. That's the advantage of the Hell Gambit. We can always keep pushing. It seems like our opponents are in hell. They always have to be defending, and there will come a point when they just can't defend anymore. For example, now they can't defend this pawn anymore or try to advance because we'd come in and deliver checkmate over here. The only move that defends it is to move the king. A really ugly move, really ugly. But if you don't know how to finish it off, you'll just end up in the same position. Your opponent will end up with the advantage. They'll kick your knight out and you'll be worse off. So you need to know how to finish it. And the finish is as simple as capturing here with the pawn, sacrificing the knight. Why? Now obviously we're not going to trade queens. And be careful because they're also threatening this check. But simply by capturing this pawn, not only do we defend the e4 pawn, but this rook is also going to fall. Notice that there's no way to defend it. Chastiger, what if I run into a really aggressive opponent like myself and they try to counterattack? If they try to strike that quickly, well, we're going to punish that too. No doubt about it. We've got the goods for everyone. We're going to crush them all. If they try to attack us, this pawn might look dangerous. Do you really think I'm going to get worried over a pawn when I've already sacrificed all the pawns on this side? Go ahead, take that pawn too. Just knight to f3, attacking the queen and making our opponent's blood boil even more, right? I take this pawn, I attack your rook, which I couldn't care less about. I just put it here and win the open file. And check this out. We're attacking with this bishop and this rook and with this other bishop too. Do I have fewer pawns? Yes, but I have a devastating attack. And actually here we can already win the game with bishop takes f7. Does this move look familiar to you? You can always win with this move. Very useful. They can't capture because we'd immediately throw in this check, which honestly gives me goosebumps. It's so beautiful. Check, and we'd take the queen. That's why they can't capture this bishop. Instead, they have to retreat. Move the king, and now here comes another move that gives me chills. I assure you, this gambit is just too beautiful to play, so it definitely deserves a like. Thank you so much. I'm giving it to you as a gift, of course. The move is, pay attention, rook takes pawn. Rook takes g7. A spectacular move, giving away the rook. Why do we give away the rook? Because we have this bishop that can recapture and also take their rook. Plus, we're attacking this knight with 2 pieces. There's not much else for them to do but capture the rook. And now after bishop takes g7, we have 2 bishops here attacking these 2 pieces way too strongly. Notice that here, the move most often played by our opponents is to bring out the knight here, at least trying to save a bit of material. And when we capture here, they take this bishop. But we're simply going to deliver a beautiful checkmate with these 2 bishops. And that's where the fun begins. Now comes the most important part of the video. What do you do if our opponent plays perfectum? It's very important to know all these mistakes. Why? Because that way we'll know how to punish them and win quickly. There are so many chances for your opponent to make a mistake that you can win a ton of games. But obviously your opponent might play well, and then you need to know how to react. That's why this little final part is the most important part of the video. What happens? That we've mentioned. Why? Because now when we play knight to f3, which is the move we should play, they can actually give us this check. Why? Because after knight to d2, like we saw before, everything we've seen before, you remember, right? There was bishop takes, king takes, and when we came in with the queen, we captured this bishop. What happens? That this bishop is now defended by the knight. So when they give us this check, knight to d2 no longer works for us. So to make it really easy to understand, always play well with this knight. Here, we won't play knight to d2. We'll have to play knight to c3. It's true that it wasn't optimal. It's not what we wanted to play. Because we're weakening, or rather blocking, the diagonal of this very strong bishop. That's true, but it doesn't matter to us because we can still get a huge advantage, and there are still plenty of chances for our opponent to make a mistake. Knight to f6 is a very good move. We simply castle, and if we notice, our opponent is playing very well, not giving us any chances to attack. But now notice that this bishop is no longer pinning the knight, and we can move it to a very good square, which is d5. You have to remember something super important every time you play the Infernal Gambit. We're down 2 pawns, which is why we have to be constantly attacking. The moment we stop attacking, our opponent will convert their material advantage and simply beat us by sheer advantage. An advantage at the end of the game, right? A material advantage. That's why now we attack this bishop and his knight with 2 pieces at once. Now our opponent has to react, and the most common thing is that they'll capture this knight. We'll capture with the pawn to keep up the pressure, and this knight will have to move. So now look, queen to d4, forming a battery, and attacking this point here. What I'm telling you is that we can't stop attacking. Notice that we're attacking with the queen and bishop, threatening checkmate. This bishop is also coming in from this direction. This knight can also jump in at some point along a certain line. So here, black has to defend. A lot of you will say, f6 defends against me. No, because you lose the knight thanks to this discovered check. That's why you can't play f6. There are very few moves that defend. Notice that no matter how perfectly they play, they're still in trouble, and now they can make a mistake. For example, here with f6. A logical move is to bring the knight here. It attacks the queen, and not only does it attack the queen, but it also defends the checkmate square. We can't deliver this checkmate anymore, because this knight is very well placed. So what do we have to do? Move the queen to the king's side to add more and more threats. We're threatening checkmate again, but now we're also threatening this knight over here. And not only that, notice that we want to reposition our bishop to keep threatening with even more pieces. Now our opponent can play d6, a very logical move. Why? Because it defends the knight and doesn't give him good play. It sets up a discovered attack on a queen, but since this knight can't jump or check, that move doesn't bother us. This discovered attack isn't a problem, because whenever the knight moves, we have checkmate. That's why now, simply with this move I explained, we win the game. The threats are just too strong, and on top of that, they can't be stopped. Look, we're threatening this checkmate, we're threatening this knight that can't move, because if it does, we'll deliver checkmate, and not only that, we're also threatening this bishop here. Notice that there's no way to defend everything, and no matter how well they've played, our opponent has a lot of chances to make a mistake. For example, playing f6, or for instance, defending with this move here. The idea you need to keep in mind is that our pieces will always be better placed than our opponents, and we'll be able to attack them with much more force than they can attack us. This last option, d5, what happens if they play d5 against us? They're shutting down all our counterplay options. The books recommend d5 against this kind of gambit. So we'll capture with the bishop and keep creating threats. Notice something here. I've come across people who play c6 thinking I'll retreat the bishop. Then we trade queens and they end up with an extra pawn. However, here we have the move that gives us victory in every game we play. Bishop takes on f7. Check. Notice it's not just check, but now they can't capture or they'd lose the queen. That's why they have to move the king out of check here to keep defending the queen. And now be careful. You shouldn't go this way or anything like that, obviously. You have to give check from a3. And now there's no way left to keep defending the queen. Here's the bishop and here is the queen, so they have to capture this bishop. And now we would end up with an extra queen. So if they play d5, you have to capture with the bishop, but now c6 is a mistake. What happens if they play knight to f6? And now, if you haven't liked the video yet, you're gonna do it now, because you're gonna love this. They try to capture this bishop, which is so important in the Infernal Gambit, because it's aiming at the f7 square. I don't care, do it, take. I don't mind, take this bishop if you want. I defend it with the knight. If you capture, I come in with the knight, and now I have an incredible knight move. A brutal knight move together with this bishop. And that's why now they can't develop this bishop either to give a check, because there's this knight here defending it. And that's why a lot of opponents think, well, I'll kick out your knight and trade queens, and now I'll cash in on my material advantage. And that's why here we have this spectacular move, check, sacrificing the knight. This one really gives you goosebumps. Look, I can't even talk now. They can't capture with the queen because we have the bishop. They have to capture with the pawn, and we simply trade queens. And now look at this. It's just delightful. It's like finding a piece of chocolate on the ground. We take here, check, and we grab the rook. The Infernal Gambit. What'd you think? Let me know in the comments. I read all of you. Leave me a big like if you enjoy these kinds of videos. I've been working hard on them for over a year now. One video every day. And I'll see you in the next video, friends. Goodbye.